Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, SAPwithIK. Hope you're all doing good. So today's topic will be on the Kanban process integrated with the production execution. So let's get started. So first we'll try to understand what is the concept of Kanban. So Kanban is basically originated from a Japanese word kan and as well as ban. So kan basically stands for car and ban basically stands for signaling. So this basically runs on using an RFID scanned by the shop floor personnel whenever there is a need to manufacture a specific material or a semi-finished or maybe a product whenever there is a shortage. So this is not kind of a make to order to say in that way, but it will only be manufactured and kept in the inventory only when there is a requirement triggered in the system. So here in the Kanban, the system will not basically use a MRP and it will not actually create planned orders, but instead it will directly create the production orders through which the Kanban dashboard can actually see those production orders, and from there itself you can make the transactions such as the confirmation of the production order and as well as the goods receipt. So here in the dashboard you will visualize the Kanbans in the form of bins, or you also can say it as cards from the end user perspective, where the end user is going to scan that particular card saying that this bin is now empty and now you have to start manufacturing it or maybe replenish it based on the procurement type of the material. So here the status of these bins, like we also can call it as the signaling to the system, where the bin will stay in the red color, which means that this is basically in the empty status. So which means that the production has to be started of this particular material or the product, and then the stock must be replenished and put in the same bin for further usage. So we can actually see that or maybe visualize in the dashboard as we move on to the further slides and also then navigate into the SAP system. And then you have a different color with the in process where the signal will be received, or maybe the process is under in process or the manufacturing is in WIP. And once the goods receipt has been posted after the manufacturing is completed, then the bin color turns into a green color. Okay. So what is the benefit of using the Kanban process? So basically, we do have the fast moving items, or maybe you also can call it as a semi-finished item where you would like to manufacture only when there is a need to assemble or manufacture its corresponding finished product, right? So only then you are going to assemble this, and then you're going to issue this particular inventory to the higher level of manufacturing processes. So the main usage is that it will be cost effective and it will be used to manage your inventory at a certain level. So let's say we are not basically manufacturing these SFGs and then stocking it into our inventory. So we only manufacture when we have a requirement from its corresponding product or the finished product. So in this particular case, the user need not every time go to the transactions like creating a production order, releasing the production order, and then confirming the operations or maybe performing the goods issue and then posting the goods receipt. So all these transactions or events can be simplified in a single click when we go into the Kanban dashboard. So we will see that in more details once we go into the SAP's system. So now when we talk about the master data that we need to enable the Kanban process is basically the production supply area. So the production supply area is the key master data that integrates your production process with the bin and also the shop floor setup. The same way, once you create this production supply area, you also need to create a control cycle for your Kanban. So only then we will be able to create an integration setup between the manufacturing order and the Kanban process. So now here, once the production supply area has been created, we will also define like what will be the storage location which will be acting as the shop floor area, where we basically stage the components or the semi-finished items that we are going to manufacture in this Kanban process. And also we need to be mindful that the storage locations that we use in the production supply area or the Kanban process should be excluded for MRP run. Why? Because we will already create a production order through the Kanban dashboard. At the same time, we should not create additional inventory or additional receipt elements for those same requirements through MRP. Right? So whenever we use a specific storage location, we need to make sure that that is excluded from MRP run. So here is a detail about the control cycle that we are going to use in the Kanban process. So basically each of these control cycle created for the Kanban process will consist of number of bins, and where in each bin will be considered as a single production order. Right? So that status that we discussed in our previous slides, the empty, in process or full, these statuses will be applied only at the bin level. So here in the control cycle, we will basically define how many bins each Kanban can actually hold and what will be the quantity that each bin can carry up to. Right? And at the same way, in this setup of the control cycle, we will also have the flexibility to manage the control parameters of the cards, where in which those cards will have the barcodes that will be scanned by the RF guns. So now the replenishment strategy. So the replenishment strategy, it plays a major role on defining what is the nature of the procurement or manufacturing of the particular product. So let's say if you are manufacturing it in-house, then you need to maintain a replenishment strategy that corresponds to in-house manufacturing. But in case you're going to procure it from a supplier, then you will use a different replenishment strategy. The same way for stock transfers as well. So now here we have the SPRO setup or the configurations that we need to enable in order to activate the Kanban process. So the very first thing that we have to do is to create a replenishment strategy. So for that we will use this particular path, go to the SPRO node production, under that you have Kanban, and then to replenishment strategies. And here we have a standard production order type created or provided by SAP called PP05, so which is basically used for the Kanban processes. So this particular production order type PP05 should undergo every configuration that we do for a normal production order, which means we have to create a production scheduling profile, we have to create the confirmation parameters, and we have to create the order type dependent parameters, so on and so forth. So it would act as a normal production order type, but will be specifically assigned only for the Kanban processes, right? And then we have the maintenance of Kanban statuses, where you're going to define the sequence of statuses for each of the bin. Like in our previous slide, we discussed on the first status will be empty, and then we navigate through the in process as a next status, and then followed by full. The same way we are going to define the categories of these control types, whether this is a classic Kanban or the event driven Kanban type, and then the printing of the Kanban card. So here is the sequence. The first step is to create a storage location. I mean, in case if it is not already available in your system. So we are going to assign the storage location into the production supply area, and we are going to exclude that from the MRP runs. And then we are going to assign the replenishment strategies for in-house or the external or the stock transfer strategies. It depends on the nature of the product. And then we are going to create the supply area in PK05, and then we are going to tag it with the control cycle in PKMC or PK01 transactions. And then we will be using the transaction PK13N, which is basically the Kanban board. Yeah, so here again we have the list of transactions that we need to be mindful of. So let's move into SAP and see the same structure and how to configure this in a new system. So here we are in SAP. So first let's go to the SPRO to check at the configuration nodes. So in the SPRO, in the IMG path, you need to find the production. So here is the production. So under production node, you will have Kanban. So under the Kanban node, you will have the replenishment strategies. But if you would like to assign a specific number range for your control cycles or the Kanban ID, then you can do it over here. If not, you can use the standard ones. So for the replenishment strategies, if the material is in-house manufactured, and this example that we'll be talking about is on the in-house manufacturing process. So we go to the in-house production strategy where we will choose the specific plant. So here my manufacturing plant is 1000 and my in-house production strategy is 0003. So if I go into the details of this particular strategy, I have defined that the control type will be by working with production orders, which means that system should create production orders as soon as I signal the bin saying that you have to create a production order or maybe replenish the inventory for it. Or also you have other options, like working with production orders through MRP run, or maybe you can just create planned orders and then go with the conversion of it, but it would be a bit of a lengthy process. So that's the reason I believe using the third option, working with production orders, makes more sense. Why? Because this is kind of a just-in-time scenario, right? And then here we assign the order type for the production orders that should be created, and the movement type in case you would like to use, in case you have some custom movement types created in your environment, you can use that. If not, you can leave it as 101 as the standard ones. And here I have mentioned that the planned orders will not be created. And then down below you have the form types to print the Kanban cards and as well as for the control cycles. So once this replenishment strategy for in-house manufacturing is completed, then we will exit and then move on to the next one, which is so here in the status node we can see this particular option or the configuration where you can define the status sequence. So this basically defines what would be the first sequence. So here the S1, S2, S3, these are the sequences in a sequential way. So here we have total 6 sequences that can be assigned to each of the sequence type. So the EXT is basically for the external, for the procurement, and then the last one TRNS is for the stock transfer, and the RF1 is basically for the in-house manufacturing. So the RF1 status sequence I have only assigned the status 2 and then the status 5. So the plus icon that you see here, it means that this is required. So which means that whenever I choose a specific status as my next status while signaling into the bin, I will always get the status empty first and then I will directly get the status as full. But I am not using the other statuses as in process, transit, or in use, or maybe wait, right? I only need 2 of it. So that's the reason I've actually selected only 2. So now that the status has been defined, so let's go into the master data to the control side, the production supply area. So the production supply area that I have created is Kanban. So here, once we open the details of the production supply area, you can see that the storage location 0001 has been assigned as my supply area, right? So if I go to the material master, this is my material master, and the storage location is 0001. Yeah. So here in the MRP4 view, I have assigned the storage location MRP indicator as not relevant for MRP, right? So this will be excluded from the MRP run. So the stock lying in this particular storage location 0001 will not be considered by MRP. But in case you are in the S4HANA environment, you know, right, you have to create this MRP area for that particular storage location and then exclude it from the MRP run by going into the details of it. Let me show you that. Going into the details of the MRP area, and here you have to assign the MRP type as PD. Okay, so that is how we have to manage in the S4 environment. So once the master data is also created, sorry, the storage location is assigned, then we will go to the control cycle LPK3, and here my supply area is Kanban. Okay, this cannot be processed from here, so then I can go to PKMC. So here we have the control cycle maintenance, but in case you have created this particular control cycle through LPK1 transaction, then you can access it via LPK3. So here I have just entered the plant and then the supply area and then execute. So here you can see the control cycle that has been created with the number 451. And if I go into the details of this, so let me go into the display mode. Yeah, so here you can see that this particular control cycle has 5 Kanbans, and each Kanban bin will have a quantity of 100 kgs, right? And then I have also assigned my replenishment strategy in 0003 that we have initially created, saying that the replenishment process goes through the execution of a production order and not a purchase order or a stock transport order, right? And I've also assigned a specific production version, but in case you have multiple, you have the ability or the flexibility to basically choose your own production version in this control cycle master data, right? And yeah, that's it. Since we have maintained the production supply area and then also we maintain the control cycle, so the next thing is that how do we assign or maybe map this particular supply area to the production order? And the answer would be to assign it in the operation of in the routing. So here this is the routing that I have created, and this is my work center. So if I go into the details of this work center, I have assigned the supply area in this particular view, in the basic data view. So this is how I can basically link my production supply area with the production master data, right? So having said that, we have actually created the required configuration, and then we have assigned the required master data. Now we will go into the execution process, which is through PK13N transaction. So in this transaction, you have these options where you can choose via the production supply area, or maybe the PSA basically stands for the production supply area for a person responsible, or maybe based on a storage location. But here we will go across the plant. So hit on enter, and now you can see all the materials and its corresponding supply area that are relevant for the Kanban process. But for the ease of understanding, I'll just go back and enter my material API so that I can work on only this particular test case. So here you can see that we have the Kanban quantity of 100 kgs, which is basically coming from my control cycle, right? And here we have 5 blocks. So these 5 blocks, they basically correspond to your Kanban bins. So each of this bin will have a quantity of 100 kilos. So that is what we configured or maybe maintained in the control cycle, right? And the color status, as you can see here, it shows as red, and then in green. So what does green mean? Means that the inventory is actually full in these 4 bins, but whereas in the 5th bin the inventory is still empty, right? So if I just double click on this particular bin, it will show me the details of the production order through which this particular quantity is being manufactured, right? So the same way, I'll go to MD04 just to show you how these production orders are being managed. Okay, so here in MD04, you forget about the top. Why? Because this is for a different process, and we are looking at the last level, which is basically differentiated through this particular storage location 0001, which is not planned in the MRP run. And right now in this storage location, we have an inventory of 601 kgs. And through this production order, we are now manufacturing 100 kgs. So now if we take a look at this production order ending with 7527, and I go into the details of this particular bin, you can see that this production order is still under WIP. So we have not yet completed the execution process of it, right? And in this production order, if you would like to make any changes, you have this option to change the replenishment, which will take you to the transaction CO02 where you can make the required changes. But the suggested way is not to make any changes, but because we should not disrupt the master data flow that is going on through the process. And here on the top, you can see the Kanban ID number 1175, which is the number of this particular bin. And then you have the control cycle 451. So all these 5 bins, the Kanban bins, will have the same control cycle, but because we have assigned only one control cycle with 5 Kanbans and 100 kgs in each bin, right? So now to make it green, I just need to say, tell the system that you have to post goods receipt for this particular production order. So the user says that now that the production is completed, you have to set the next status, which is automatically picked from our sequence status, right, in the configuration. Now, as you can see, this message that one Kanban has been processed and this 1175 bin is now in green. So now if I go back to MD04 and do a refresh, since the GR is posted, they should disappear from MD04. So now it has been removed from MD04 and the inventory got increased from 601 to 701. The same way, if the user says that this particular Kanban 1170 is, the quantity lying in this particular bin is now consumed, and now you have to start processing or maybe start replenishing the quantity of it. So then he does the right click on this and then go assign this option as the set next status. So the next status in our sequence is basically to empty the bin, right? So now that the bin is empty, 1170 is now in red. And here you can see that one Kanban has been processed. If you hover your cursor on this particular bin, you can see the production order number below. It says 6007528. To verify that, I'll go back to MD04 and do a refresh. And here is my production order 6007528. Okay, and it says that the 100 kgs will now be manufactured through this production order. And now going back to the board, I'll again select this production order and do a confirmation. So before posting the confirmation, I would like to show you the status of it. Yeah, let's go into the display mode of it. Okay, you can see that we do not have any status of the confirmation here yet. So I'll go back to the board, right click, and we'll do the confirmation. Confirmation here, I am posting a final confirmation saying that the total yield of 100 kgs will be the output of this particular production order, and then I'm going to save it. But in case you would like to set any automatic consumption or maybe the backfetching of components, that is also possible by assigning the backflash indicators for the relevant components in the production orders. So now I'm going to save it. You can see that the confirmation of the order has been saved over here. So go back to MD04, refresh, go to the display. Now you can see we have the status CNF updated in the production order, which means that the order has been confirmed. I'll go back to the board again, right click, and then set next status. Now it is green, which basically means that this particular 100 quantity has been manufactured, and now it will be updated in my inventory level at the storage location. Now do a refresh. Now it has been updated. So if I go back to this board again, I go into the details of this. So here it will show me the last process production order against this particular Kanban number. So if I click on display, you can see the status of it as CNF and as well as DLB, and the total quantity has been delivered. So this is how you can basically process the Kanban cards with a single click and reduce the number of transactions that the user has to perform on a day-to-day basis. That's all for today, guys. Thank you for your time here. Let's meet again in our next video. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, take care. Bye-bye.